Plastic evaluation is our core expertise at Gradical. We help medical technology companies choose the right plastic for their application with the technical suitability, regulatory compliance, and improved sustainability. Learn more under www.gradical.ch/plastic-evaluation. Our guest today is Jim Giger. Jim is an experienced leader in innovation and product development. In his stellar career, he managed development and innovation teams across multiple industries, including medical device. Currently, he is Technology Director at Hamilton Medical, where he aims to deliver innovation in the critical care sector. Here is our discussion. Hi, Jim, and welcome back to the podcast. You're a Technology Director now, and how does one deliver innovation in the medical device industry?
Hi, Lucas. Many thanks for having me in your podcast. For me, there are a lot of different definitions of innovations. And for me, it's really about creating and also very important, successfully implement products or services. And they have to bring a significant improvement or value. So, for example, it has to solve a real problem. It has to increase efficiency or enable also a completely new kind of working. So I think that's very important. And what we also have to keep in mind, there's a broad range of different kind of innovations. It can come from very incremental one to radical or even disruptive ones. So all these kind of innovations can bring significant benefits. So it's not only the ones very well-known radical ones, which are innovations. And if you look specifically at the field of medical devices, I would also say, especially there, it's very important to look at the different kind of innovations. What's very well known are the current problems that we have in the medical sector in general, right? So, probably it's undercapacity. It's also lack of highly qualified and educated personnel. And all these things lead to innovations more in the direction of supporting medical device professionals through the increase of efficiency, ease of use, automation, and so on and so forth. And other fields, it's very obvious, are enhanced medical therapies, but also much easier ones, like, for example, if you have more affordable prices or lower cost of your products, this leads also to better access of medical treatments. So all these different kinds of innovations can lead to very big value in the medical device industry.
Okay. So I think incremental is understood easily. So you make something a little more efficient or a little less costly. But how would you define the difference between radical and disruptive?
A radical innovation, there's not a really sharp definition, I would say. It's also how different companies and different schools define that. But in my opinion, if you have a radical, it very depends on the company. It could be like similar kind of solutions in different markets. It could be a complete different product in markets where the company hasn't been in, which would be more radical from a company point of view. But if you go in like disruptive, this is really if you change completely the kind of working. So you not only for your product or your product portfolio, but also for the general markets and benchmark products and so on, which are in the market.
Okay, so for example, going from a physical to a digital product, so video was disrupted by streaming or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does a product development process look like?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very general question, but for medical devices, it's very much defined by regulations. I think you all are aware that regulations play a big portion in the medical device field. And there is the ISO 13485, the European Medical Device Regulation, MDR, and also the US 21 CFR Part 820. And they all together define very much the boundaries and the requirements for such product development process. In the end, how the development process shall be realized to be compliant with all these regulations, that's up to each manufacturer. You still have a certain possibility for interpretation of that. One very crucial point, in my opinion, is that we distinguish between the real product development process and something like an overarching, I usually call it innovation process. So the overarching process that covers the full span from early ideas to the end of life of a product. that's the huge difference, because product development is very much defined by these formerly mentioned regulations, and the overarching process gives you much more freedom. And I often use like the model of an innovation process with 4 sub-processes. So the first would be the first phase would be called like scoping or ideation, which describes a structured approach to generate product or service visions or ideas. The second would then be more like exploration or discovery, where the fundamental question shall be answered: do we really develop the right product? Where the third will then be the classical product development process or execution, where you as a company have to guarantee that your product that you develop is compliant and it's in accordance with all the regulation regarding performance, compliance, and so on. And the fourth and last one, which is quite often not that present, but which is super important, is post-market or life cycle. In this phase, where the product is already on the market, it must be secure that the product remains compliant to all the regulatory requirements, and ideally even get some improvements, which are usually then incremental innovations.
So first you get an idea somehow, either from your employees or from your customers or whatever, and then you'll have to prove that this idea is worth developing. And maybe we can start here. How do you really know that this is the right product that you're developing?
Yes, that's a very good question. So as you mentioned, the very first one is to find ideas in a structured way. You can use like the double diamond structure or method and others. But the second one, which then I would call like discovery or exploration phase, where, as you said, you want to answer this very famous question: do we develop the right product? That's not that easy. And in the end, you try to do that in the best way possible. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen if you develop a new product? You know, the worst thing that can happen, you develop the product, you bring it on the market, and no one wants to buy it. So you invested a lot of time and money to develop the wrong product. And it even hurts double, especially if you take into consideration your opportunity costs. So that's why I would say that's one of the 2 main reasons, in my opinion, why it's very good to have something like an exploration or discovery phase. And the second topic is, as we discussed in the development phase, you have to follow all the regulations. But no one really tells you, how knowledgeable you should be, or for example, also how mature your technology should be before you start a product development. So it's very important, especially for medical device companies, that you have something like a playground, that you have something like a phase where you can also discover all these different product opportunities. And this helps a lot if you separate this one from the product development.
Yeah, so that you have a place where you can learn and not just execute. So the first thing you described is what Eric Ries would call achieving failure. So do on time and on budget what nobody wanted. And it is, in his opinion, the biggest waste of the current society, because like money and resources you can also always compensate for, but lifetime of humans can never be compensated for. So spending your whole life developing something that nobody would ever use, that's a very wasteful activity. And lots of innovations or developments end up in this way because nobody really bothered to check with a customer or your market if this is even desirable. And it's very important to get in the front of the customer very, very soon. However, this is very tricky with medical device because you can't just give a doctor a medical device without approval and say, hey, use this and see how it goes, because that would be too risky. So it's very difficult to like navigate this, get a fast feedback loop going with the customers, and still hold all the regulations and be compliant to all the regulations. Yeah, but what makes a solution really desirable for a customer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good topic. I think on one hand, you're right. When it comes to new clinical treatments, so on and so forth. So it's very important that you, in the end, have like prototypes or even a zero series where you can do your studies, so on and so forth. But a lot of the also today's innovation, they're not only in the new treatments. You have a lot of innovations which are in the usability, which are in the how we work, how do we process our data, so on and so forth. So all these things, which in my opinion makes like a huge portion of new innovations, also in the medical device field, they can be, I would say, like verified, tested in a very early stage already without like really gathering clinical data. So I think that we really have to distinguish, as you mentioned. That's completely right.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, when we come to desirability, which is one of the three important pillars beside viability and feasibility, desirability is probably the most tricky one, in my opinion, because as you said, cannot just go to a medical professional and ask them, okay, guys, what do you want to have? So I really like the very famous quote of Henry Ford, and I think this explains the dilemma very perfectly, because he said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So it's not about horses, but it's about, how can they even know what they want to have if they don't even know what's possible, right? And I would say that's the tricky thing about desirability. So that's why desirability is a lot about understanding, detecting, observations, and so on, to really see the relevant stakeholder needs. And stakeholders, as we discussed, can be patients, but it's also very much users. It can be the environment. It can be different parts in the whole chain or in the further environment. So also there are different methods, or several methods and frameworks to do that in a structured way. I think that's the important thing, that you really do that in a structured way, fail fast if possible, and then also very important, learn, and also look, where are similar problems already solved in a good way, because I think I'm also really very much about the understanding that we do not have to learn everything by our own, everything that's already solved, we should already start from there. So really, yeah, you do not have to fail, or you do not have to do every single fail by yourself.
Yeah, you do not have to reinvent the wheel every time. Yeah,
Exactly.
but it's also like this quote. This quote, I like it a lot. Ford has a few good quotes, and that's one of them. By the way, cars would be a perfect example of a disruptive innovation, because nobody would ever imagine like having a car, and so everything that people could imagine is like faster and stronger horses. But it's also about the measurements, the frameworks that you take to assess desirability. Usually people do questionnaires. How did you like this? How did you like that? But sometimes people can't tell you what they want. They can experience it. So sometimes you have to user test, and that's that's not as easy. So you probably give them just a dummy and see if they can figure it out for themselves. And then you can measure how like user interact with your product. You have anything to say about these testing methods or frameworks?
Sure. As you mentioned, it's not that easy, and it's quite often about really having stuff in your hand. And as you said, there are questionnaires that can give you a certain feedback, but it's very good if you really use something, if you really experience something that's a different level. And nowadays we also have different technologies. We can really go from like, I would say, very early ideas to like click dummies. If you have a user interface, you can go to very early prototypes, thanks to also different manufacturing methods that we have nowadays, right? With all the AEM, additive manufacturing methods, so on and so forth. Then you can also even use, if you're more sophisticated, you can use augmented reality, where your customer, user, whoever stakeholder can already be part of this new innovation, even if it's not physically there. So I think it's a lot about creativity. And I think it's both things that are very important. So on one hand, it's important that the future user or stakeholder can experience the new idea, but it's also very important that the engineering team can experience the current status, that they experience and understand how it's currently done. Also there, experience gives you much more than just describing, explaining. I think that's one of the crucial points. And even then, when someone experiences something or tests something, it's a lot about observation, to observe how this person is doing it. Because quite often you do something and you do not even realize that's probably not the easiest, smartest way to do it, right? So I think it's still a combination.
Yeah, that's the lean principle. I'm probably gonna butcher the Japanese very, very much, but it's like ichi genbutsu. It's called. It's like get your foot out the door and see for
Exactly.
yourself. So that's I think developing in your lab in the medical device development and never seeing a patient, never seeing a customer, never seeing a physician that uses your product. That's probably a bad idea. So get out and see your customers, see what they're dealing with, because I think desirability is the most important topic, because technically a lot is feasible. The rate of technical development is astounding with the new technologies coming up like artificial intelligence or additive manufacturing, and also like the viability. I think you can make a lot work. If it's not made from platinum, you can make a lot work, because like raw material prices is something that is pretty damn hard to fix. If it's just not in there, if there's just not enough raw material for your product to be technically feasible, but the rest is is like a lot easier than desirability. Should this be built is probably the most important question that you can address. Do you have anything to say? Because then we will move on to like viability and how you really assess what technology will cost. Credical is the plastic expert in medical technology and supports you in the areas of sustainable plastics and material compliance. Our course, Sustainable Plastics and Medical Technology, will bring your development team up to date with the latest developments in sustainable plastics. In addition, we offer the course Regulatory Aspects of Plastic Selection at the CATS and the SCATZ, which provides guidance through the maze of regulations when selecting materials. More under www.credical.ch.
No, I think that's good. I mean, let's go on with viability. Viability, this is like the second pillar looking at it after desirability. So it's a lot about, in the end, can we also make money with this product or this solution? And I think that's also a very, very crucial point. And I think that's probably the one most of the startups really fail. They have usually quite good idea. Usually they come from either from the desirability point of view or the feasibility, so the technical feasibility point of view, so like technology push. And quite often then they fail in the transforming that into a product that also gets like cash back on the market. So that's why I think it's important when we look at viability to really understand also the competition on the market, what's already there. And it's not only the product, it's very, very much about the access and distribution network. Do you really have access to this market? How does this market work? Is it end user market? Is it a B2B market? So there are different kinds of markets. How do you price your solution? It's also very difficult, especially if you are coming new to the market or if you have a new product, which is probably, innovative. Do you like a cost plus pricing or a value pricing? I think that's also very crucial. How is your price stability from market to market, but also over time? And then also markets in general, is there already a market? I mean, we know from quite famous example that's usually not even the first mover, the one which really in the end wins the race, right? We know it from Facebook, so on and so forth. So it's not really the first one, because that's very difficult. If you also have to establish a market first before you can bring your product on this market, it's even more difficult. So saying that, not only the first movers are the ones, sometimes it's even more difficult to be the first mover, especially if you have to develop a market.
Yeah, and if I can just quickly, because in medical device, this is especially the case, because like if you have something like a digital product, consumer product, people are used to like a new digital service or something like that. And there are always some like first movers that will try your product and say, hey, this is cool, this is hip now. But like with medical professionals, like especially in surgery or critical care or whatever, it's like they're very conservative, because like this is proven, it works, and this is the status quo. And if it's not like a significant improvement of outcomes or of cost, we won't change. We won't even let you in the door. So if you have to establish a new technology and like kick in the door for the medical professionals, that's a very hard job. And then another guy can come in after you and then outcompete you on price or on technical matters or stuff like that. So it's very, very hard to establish new markets in medical technology. But go on.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can also minimize your risk, especially if you are in, for example, B2B business. You can do that with like purchase agreements. I mean, usually these agreements then have like, they're weighting like the purchase volume versus exclusivity. So usually you have to give some of your exclusivity to the specific customers, but you get like, on the other hand, you get on the purchase agreement certain knowledge about what you will gain. But then you can minimize your risks, but you also limit your potential success. But there are some different models depending on the market. And in the end, you can always, I would say, the viability can be quite easily quantified, even if it's not that easy to really get the raw data to do these calculations like return on investment, net present value, and so on. So the problem usually lies in the estimation of the values to calculate these metrics. So I think that's also sometimes probably a little bit misleading if you are comparing like hard numbers on return on investment from one project to the other, because the underlying know-how and underlying numbers are not that clear.
Yeah, because I think the most important metric for viability is like what are your hard manufacturing costs, because that's something you can calculate and that's something that you can assess, because the underlying business plan is always a hockey stick and we all know it's made up. It's like a hockey stick, it goes up forever and we're going to make billions of dollars. Like if you really push for it, who really believes it? We believe that the product will be viable in the future because we know manufacturing costs. We know that we have access to these customers, but there's always a business plan and it's never really actually exactly like that happening. But if you assess desirability, so customer really needs to have this problem solved, and you can make money if you can sell them, then it's basically 2 out of the 3 is done, and then you just need to be able to pull it off. So basically it has to be technically feasible. Yeah. And that would be the next point. How do you like quickly assess if something is technically feasible or just like too much of a hassle to develop?
Yeah, I think that's also a challenge. And I think you also know that, especially in the last years, when you have also seen all these startups, which are probably following a little bit the term of like fake it until you make it. I think I mean, it could be one tactics to do it like this and then like sell your whole company. But on the other hand, if you really want to bring a product on the market and you have to show your feasibility, that's for sure in the end also a big work. You have to show that it's technically feasible. You have to show that it's from a intellectual property point of view, not infringing any existing patents and so on and so forth. You have to see that your certificates that you have would allow you to produce these products. You have to clarify, like, is there a physical solution for this problem at all? Then you also have to show, as you mentioned, cost of goods manufactured or cost of goods sold. That's very important. You need to have a quite good estimation what would be the manufacturing costs. So it's a very difficult topic on many different layers. So I think that's why in the feasibility, all this comes together. That's why I probably also see a lot of new developments coming from technology push, because if you once get over this hurdle, you are already on a quite good way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if we discussed, all of the 3 have to be there. So even if you just have one, which is not given, viability, feasibility, desirability, the whole system will collapse.
Yeah. So what I think a good application of fake it until you make it is like fake the technology until you know there's really a market for it. So what you could do is like you have an automation for customer service using some sort of chatbot. And then until you know that people would really be comfortable in doing this, you can just have people on the other end and like then answer via people and see what people respond to. So is this really desirable? Do they really want customer service over chat? And then build a technology after that you have verified that there's really a market. Or you try to put up an ad and see if people respond to the ad, and then build the product after that you already established that there's a desirability for this. But I mean, technically feasible, it's like if you're going deep into the medical technology, there's like measurement principles from physics that are coming out. So basically, if you have novel technology coming from university and you just need to apply it, if you can get hold of the intellectual property, that's certainly one way to assess it. Are there like scientific papers on that? And like the second thing is like not only feasibility in general. So can it be done, but can we do it? And should we do it? So is this like our core competency? So should our company go in this direction? And then here, I think it's like a strategic decision. Should you go into this direction or not? Maybe you can elaborate a little on how your development strategy should be aligned with this process.
Yeah, I think that's, in my opinion, now, if you talk about strategy, it's very important that it's really aligned. I mean, strategy, as you just mentioned, you as a company also have to think about in which markets, in which applications you want to be in, also in the future, and where do you want to invest. I think that's very important on a strategic level. And then you also have your strategy, and when you do your decisions on projects, which projects do you want to start, which project do you want to go further or push or whatever, or also prioritization topics, then you always should take your strategy and really mirror it with this one. So you see the strategy, you mirror your current probably daily or weekly decisions with the strategy, and then you see that this is like guiding you through your decisions. So I think that's very important, not to fail into the trap that you change your decisions just on daily basis or on tactics. I think that's very important.
Yeah, because the trap that we technical people fall into is like we fall in love with the solution. We get some cool tech and we want to apply it. And then you're like a man with a hammer and everything looks like a nail. So, and I think I remember last time that we talked about development and innovation in the German podcast. I think I used exact same example. You need to fall in love with the problem first, and then find the solution from a specific toolkit, and not fall in love with your tech and then go ahead and search for a solution for it. That there can always be like a technology push that this technology has been applied here and we were very successful and we were going to roll it out. I think that's something different. But like if you have a very cool tech and you come from the university world, and then there are a lot of startups that they're just looking for problems for their solution. They're seldomly successful. Yeah, if you want to comment on that, because I have another question coming up that I really, really love.
I fully agree. I mean, yeah, I think that's common understanding. I agree.
Yeah. So it's a very, very topic that is very dear to my heart, because there's like two paradigms how to develop a product, to lead a project. One is waterfall, like as you described. With first we're going to have a concept, and we have the requirements. Then we're going into sampling testing, and then in the end we roll it out to series production, and then we get it approved, and then it's on the market, which takes us a lot of time in medical technology. Typically 3 to 5 years development cycles until you have a product on the market. And then there's like the agile, iterative, lean approach that tries to get the product as soon as possible to the user, to the end customer, and then iterate with customer feedback. And that's not always possible, as we discussed, because like in medical, you have a lot of restrictions in terms of regulations, which is, I think, a pity. We should find a regulation that can work in this iterative way. Do you see a solution for this? How to move iteratively and be customer-centric, be problem-centric, and move faster through this development process? Because 3 to 5 years is a long time and the world can change.
Yeah, that's true. I think what you have to keep in mind, there are certain boundaries, which are, when you talk about the product development process, which are given by ISO 3485, but also 21 CFR 820, which just define also a very sequential step or order of steps, which is very much waterfall, right? I mean, this can really lead to the impression that only purely waterfall approach can be possible. And I think when it really comes to market a product, I think there we also have to be very careful. It very much depends on the product, also which medical device class it is. Then it depends on how many different registrations in different countries do you need to have. I think that's why you cannot just say there is a general rule how you can do something or how you have to do something or not, especially when it comes to class 1 devices where you have like self-declared, for example, your CE mark. I think there it's easier for sure if you have like class 2 and above, especially when it comes to all the specific ones that you have to have in different countries, or sometimes even in every single country. I think that's a little bit difficult. So that's why I think we should also focus on, if we talk about waterfall, to be more agile in these waterfall kind of boundaries of the regulation. So that's the idea, because I think then in the end, we can also speed up in the process, and we can already gather feedback, even probably with not released products, but just as we discussed on a prototype level. So I think this also helps us to be just faster in the process, because everybody who ever developed a product or works in engineering knows that a purely sequential or waterfall concept does not really work, right? Also in your own thinking, right? You have a specification, you look at your implementation of it, then you test it, and then you go ahead and start again from specifying, designing, testing, and improving. So that's the natural cycle. And I think there are ways to do this kind of working, or to establish this kind of working also in the given boundaries of the product development process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you think that you would have then agile nested within the waterfall process? And because it's all about fast feedback. If you have a requirement that is 3 years old and never has been tested, maybe the requirement is just wrong. Or like we all know these design fails where you have a button somewhere where you cannot reach it, or stuff like that. That is, from a usability perspective, kind of like completely bonkers. That you cannot imagine how you would use that, and because it has never been tested, and then it was just too late, and let's just roll it out because we have no other choice, or else we go bankrupt, basically. So how do we increase the speed for feedback within the waterfall stages? How would you do that? Do you enjoy the podcast? Then subscribe and rate it on your platform, and join the discussion on LinkedIn. Your feedback and comments help us improve the podcast and bring relevant topics to you. Let's form a better world with plastics.
It's exactly what you mentioned. It's like a little bit an agile method within like the given kind of boundaries. Mm-hmm. As I said, they are not super, or there's still room for interpretation, but using an agile framework within these boundaries. And I think the first topic, which is very important, that if we talk about design input, so the very first part of product development, we should really look at the very, very high level of requirements. So which are like intended use, regulatory requirements, risk management. I mean, there you can do a preliminary hazard analysis, and are also very high-level stakeholder requirements. And only these level of requirements should be in the design input, because there, the probability that they change, this is very, very low. So it's very exceptional cases where we really have to change then this design input. And more detailed specification, which already described the solution. I think we have to be very careful that we distinguish between real requirements and describing already the solution. These guys shall be implemented in the design process and design output. Because within this phase of design process and design output, there we can really have these iterative development cycles, because we have like detailed specification, we can design there, we can test there, and we can improve it in each iteration. And I think a very important principle, if we use it like this, is also to understand that within this design process and design output phase, verification records and verification results can be generated, which can then also be used afterwards in the verification phase. So I think that's very important to understand. There will never be like a one design freeze on one day where all the units, subsystems, systems will be at one stage and only afterwards you test. So your constant cycling could be on a unit level, could be on a subsystem level, or on a system level. And if you generate verification records, you can use them for your final verification report under one condition, which is very important, that the device under test, which you tested, does not differ to the final design in these characteristics which are proven in the respective test.
Okay, so like if you have a support and you have maybe a resistor and that there's the resistance that you measure, like the housing may change, but the resistor is the same, and then you can use it.
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, I always ask my listeners for the last for an advice at the end of the podcast. I'm going to do that with you too. But what comes up a lot is like, do get us involved at an early stage. May that be like the regulatory guys, because like a classic one is like, we finished development and now we just need CE mark. What do we need to do? It's like, yeah, guys, buckle up because you may have to change your design again. And the other one was, for example, material selection. Like if you have to change materials in the later stage of development, it's gonna be tough, man, because like the toolings and manufacturing methods and stuff like that, that's gonna be difficult to change if you not have to redo it. Yeah, and electrical safety. That was also like the last episode we talked about that. Like if you come with an electrical device and then we need to do the safety tests now, and it's like, did you consider that during the design phase? Because if like the distance between two conductors is not big enough, you have to redesign your device. So that's a very important point. Get people involved at an early stage. And then like I think new stuff is also coming up, like this is the whole sustainability thing. So you have to involve material selection and sustainability at the very early stage in order to get the desirability, because people are expecting not only a working device, but that device is also sustainable. Do you see that trend too?
I see the trend too. I think it depends a little bit, especially, I mean, when we are talking about medical device, it's a huge range. And I mean, the material selection is very crucial. I think we are aware of that. Everywhere where material is in contact with the patient user environment, there it's critical. I think most of you probably already heard about compliance topics, biocompatibility, and so on and so forth. So this comes all in addition to like purely mechanical properties, price, and whatever in all like standard products, right? That's the addition. And especially when we talk about consumables, there's quite often like plastics are the predominant materials, obviously, due to prices, due to the process of injection molding, and so on and so forth. And there, obviously, the raw material has usually a significant influence on price, but also on design, manufacturability, and also on CO2 footprint. So I think that's also where, for example, in the consumables, the material and the sustainability are have the most obvious intersection. And then what's also key, in my opinion, is that when you do like have products which very much are depending on material and raw materials and material selection, it's very important that you really have your experts with you. It can also be external experts or internal ones. And you bring them on a very early stage, as you mentioned. When you really do your material selection or evaluation, then it's crucial that you look at all these topics, like certificates, like CO2 footprint, so on and so forth. So this is the one topic. And the other one, if you're in a business where this is very important, I would recommend that you really separate, I usually call it technology development from product development. So that you really do your technology roadmap with your technology specific topics separately, because usually you should develop this know-how to a certain maturity before you want to use it directly in products. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also something I would then recommend.
So that you not only have like a concept where you can try out different products and see if they work, see if they're feasible, viable, and desirable, but also have like a playground where you can just develop technical knowledge.
Yes.
And how much would you dedicate, like, because you're a technology director, and I think, what did you mention, like 200 people, something like that?
Yes.
And how do you dedicate the resources to these things? How do you know who to put, or how much of these resources to put on which
Mm.
topic?
Yeah, I think technology development or development of your core know-how, core knowledge, however you would like to call it, I think it's very crucial because just one example, the problem a little bit with this one is you don't realize it if you're not doing it for 2 years, 3 years, sometimes for even 5 years, right? Because it's not something that you need in your daily tasks. Very, very daily, very urgent is like life cycle. That's clear. Products are on the market. You have to probably change something or fix something. That's super short term. Mid-term is probably developing a new product, and long term is technology development. So really being on the next level of technology. So that's the most difficult thing. You do not realize it in your daily work that you probably do not do it properly, but it's going to be like has a big impact at one point in time, because at one point you probably realize, okay, you're not state of the art anymore, or even ahead of your competition. So you will not be able to develop new innovative product. And to get like back on track again, I would say a lot of companies do not even or aren't even able to do that anymore. So there would be a big problem, or others would take years to get back. So that's the one thing which I think is very important. And then you ask me what I would spend. I think it depends a lot on the technology. If it's it's a very technology driven company with also such products. But I would say like in around about between 10 and 20% that you should also invest into your core technologies and invest to be there ahead of your competition.
Yeah, because that's the problem that you described. It's like daily business eats innovation for breakfast. And it's
Exactly.
like, oh, there's always something pressing. There's always something that is very urgent, but like innovation is important, and not urgent, because it's like your competition is not today. They're out with a different product disrupting your market, but at some point they will. But so you might spend 10 to 15%. It's like in your personal life, 10 to 15% go to savings and investment, which is long-term storage of basically know-how and resources that you're putting in there. So I think solid advice here. Yeah, I wanted to quickly just talk about the sustainability point again, because I think you were spot on with the developing of know-how about sustainable materials, and that the sustainable materials are much more important in the consumable space, because it's also much more material. A electrical device, the biggest impact usually of the electrical device is if it has a certain lifespan. It's going to be use time electricity, or the use time electricity is going to be the biggest one, depending on how much you use it. If you just use it once, it's like you wouldn't use a single use MRI or something like that, then the impact of an MRI is extremely high, but use time energy is usually the biggest one. So making the devices more energy efficient is going to be the biggest impact that you can do. But using less material and using less impactful materials is going to be the key for consumables. And that's my typical day-to-day project. It's like the development teams come to me and say, like, I want to develop next generation of my medical consumable. They have to have the clinical advantages, this, and this, and then they're going to have like usability improvement. And we want it to be more sustainable. How can we do that? What should we take, and what can we even do? And that's like the core expertise, and what I'm very passionate about. Yeah, but let's talk about what you're passionate about. You're passionate about developing products. Why? Why do you like this?
That's a good question. I think I can even answer it by myself. So I do not really know where it comes from, honestly. I mean, as long as I can remember, I think it was always my passion for like building stuff, improving, optimizing things. So I usually say I'm a little bit a typical Lego child. I think That's probably the background of a lot of engineers. But also nowadays, I mean, it's more clear, right? I see some obvious reasons why my passion for product development is still there. On one hand, it's about the final product. When we see, especially in medical device field, we see how this brings benefits, especially for patients and also for users. I think that's something that it's really enlightening. On the other hand, it's also very much enjoying the process of developing. So it's not only the final product. So I really like seeing it from early ideas to like concepts, which in probably several cycles of improvements, right? Probably once you thought you were on the right track and then you redo it completely different. So I think being creative without losing the focus, I think that's very important. The focus of being efficient in execution, because you cannot just be creative for the whole day. That's also not going to work. So I think this mixture between being creative for new ideas, but still know that you have to find solutions which are efficient also in execution. So I think that's probably what makes me passionate about product development.
Yeah, that's great. I think we share a lot of that. It's like I always wanted to be an inventor when I was like 7 years old. It's like those Freundschaftsbüchli, like those booklets that you gave your friends. I always wrote like engineer or inventor. That's what I wanted to be. So let's come to the last question. What advice would you like to give to our listeners in terms of product development and MedTech?
Yeah, advices are never easy, But if I would have to choose one or the other topic, I think I would keep in mind or probably focus on processes. I think that's very important. It's probably not the most interesting one, especially we were talking before about, being entrepreneurial and so on and so forth. But finding the most efficient way to fulfill this immense number of regulations given in the medical device field. And, this includes like processes, which are probably written on paper, whatever, but it's also very much about tool change, organizational structure, so on and so forth. So everything should be implemented and optimized to achieve compliance of your products, but in the most efficient way. I think that's the one I would give as an advice. And the second one, probably not only focusing on product development, but also on post-market or life cycle. Many medical device or medical devices will be on the market for 10 years plus. Thus, changes of the products are usually unavoidable. You will always have like changes. So build your product architecture, your technical documentation, and all around that, such that changes and releases can be done very efficient and as efficient as possible.
Very solid advice as always. So any last words, Jim?
I think it was more than enough from my side. Thank you very much for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you too. So this was Jim Giger from Hamilton Medical, and until the next time. Still looking for more in regards to plastics and medical technology? Visit our website www.gradical.ch and inform yourself on the services of Gradical. You can also check out our market report on medical grade plastics on www.medicalgradeplastics.de. Or you attend a training regarding material compliance at CATS or at SKZ. And of course, don't forget to rate and subscribe our podcast wherever you get your podcast. Let's form a better world with plastics.